What's up, everyone? It's your girl Brain Shanae, and today I'm here to share with you my Patreon 2025 book club selections. This year, or I should say in 2025, I am trying to be more organized. Like, that's one of the main things that I want to do next year. That's one of my main goals, and I intend to succeed. And so today I'm here to share with you all the books for my book club for Patreon. These are books that any of my patrons can join in on. It's not like a mandatory thing. There might be books that they may be interested in reading, or there might be books that you are not interested in reading. It's optional. And on my Patreon, if you didn't know, I have a Patreon. And so with Patreon, we do a lot of reading sprints. I'll post my videos up prior to anybody else, so they get first dibs. Also, book club is another thing. And we'll have book discussions as well, strictly for my patrons. And so with my book club, I have it as an optional thing where if they don't want to participate in January, they can participate in February, March, April, any time of the year, especially if it's a book that they really want to get a hold of and want to talk about it. So I'm here to share with you all the books that that I've selected for next year, for 2025, from January all the way to November. I didn't do December because December is pretty much the month where we're trying to get our goals accomplished. We're trying to get our reading goals, everything accomplished in December. So I feel like that'll be the perfect time. December, there won't be a book, so we have that month off. But for book club, so if you participate in January, we're going to have the live discussion on my Patreon on the following month, so you have that cushion. And I'm going to have it where it's scheduled on every Thursday. I'm trying to make it more consistent as far as my schedule. I feel like Thursdays it's doable, and I can work with that, as having live discussions as well as reading sprints on Thursdays for my patrons. I feel like that's going to be the day. I had to find a way and set a day for that particularly. And so here is the graphic regarding what we're going to be reading for the whole year of 2025. So in January, we have Death of the Author by Nnedi Okorafor. Now, this book I know does come out in January, but I feel like this will be a fun book to read. Nnedi Okorafor and her writing is just fantastic and phenomenal in itself. And so I felt like this will be the perfect book to read for January. And then in February, we have Grave Empire by Richard Swan. This will be the very first book that I read by Richard Swan, and I've heard it's really hyped up. Like, you see it everywhere. You see a lot of special editions for this particular book as well. Like, for instance, the Broken Binding just announced like they're going to be having a special edition for this particular book. And I made sure that when I selected these books, like, first off, they're newer books, they're new releases for 2025. I didn't choose any older books because I feel like there may be people that have already read these books or whatnot, and I feel like, okay, let's just go ahead and do new releases. That way, no one has read them. Everyone gets a fresh start of reading these because they are new releases for 2025 in particular. So that's another reason why I chose these titles. And third of all, I know that these books can be accessible. I wanted to make sure that was the one of the main things, was that these books were accessible. It's either you get them from your local library, if you have Audible, any type of audiobook app like Hoopla, Libby, Kindle Unlimited, whatsoever. I want to make sure that these books were accessible to everyone. And so, like I said, you do not have to buy these books because in 2025, that's another goal for me, is to utilize my library. So you have right now where you can go onto your library app or whatever and request these books and put them on hold or whatever. So you have all this in advance. And so once again, February is going to be Grave Empire by Richard Swan. In March is going to be Watermoon by Samantha Soto Yambo. I've heard nothing but great things about this book. I've seen it everywhere. I know this book comes out in January, but I wanted to space out these books, and I want to give everybody a chance to read them or whatever. So I feel like, okay, we'll since this book comes out in January, we'll read it in March, gives everybody that time, especially if you need to put it on hold or whatever, what have you. And so once again, for March, Watermoon by Samantha Soto Yambo. And then in April, we have The Language of Dragons by S.F. Williamson. Once again, I've been seeing this book everywhere, and I'm like, all right, let's go ahead and read this. And it has dragons in it. The Language of Dragons, like anything with dragons, you got me, you sold me. So I'm really excited to read this in April, especially with all of you and my Patreon. So if you aren't a patron, you definitely can do so. I will leave a link down below in the description so you can join. It's $4. It's nothing too crazy. Hopefully you don't think $4 is crazy. But yeah, so you can definitely join. Once again, the link will be down below in the description for my Patreon if you'd like to join. And then for May, we have Cursebound by Sarah El Arifi. Love her book so much. Last in 2024 we read Faybound, and so this is the second book in the series. Also, since this is part of a series, I strategically place this in May because in the previous months or whatever, you have a chance to read the first book. So I wanted to just be mindful of that. So if you haven't even read Faybound, you have that time, you have that cushion, because let's say if you don't read any books for January, February, or March or April, you have those months where you can read Faybound, and get caught up, and then read Cursebound in May. So just be mindful of that. And then in June, we have The Outcast Mage. This is by Annabelle Campbell. Honestly, this was the cover for me. I'm like, oh, it's an outcast and she's a mage. I'm like, why not? So that's why I chose The Outcast Mage. I'm like, okay, this is interesting. And then July, we have Faithbreaker by Hannah Kaner. Once again, this is part of a series. I think this is the final book. I think it's a trilogy. There's 2 other books prior to Faithbreaker, but once again, when I talked about Cursebound, I was also telling you, like, within those previous months, you can read the books, and catch up on the series. So this is the 3rd book in the series. I'm once again, I think it's a trilogy, so I think this is the last and final book. But you have the previous months to read the other 2 books prior to July. So once again, for July is Faithbreaker by Hannah Kaner. And then in August, we have Anji Kills a King. This is by Evan Leakham. Haven't heard much about it, but I've been seeing it on people's anticipated releases for 2025. So I'm here for it. I'm like, why not? Anji Kills a King. That title just gets me already. I'm like, okay, this is going to be juicy. It's going to be a lot of blood, slaying, whatnot. So I'm here for it. So once again, for August, it's going to be Anji Kills a King by Evan Leakham. And then for September, we have Don't Sleep with the Dead by Nevo. Anything by Nevo, I'm going to read. Love Nevo. So Don't Sleep with the Dead, I'm like, okay, you already got me. So for September, once again, it's Don't Sleep with the Dead by Nevo. And then October, we have Calabasas by R.F. Kuang. I've been seeing this book on people's anticipated releases all over the place, and of course, like, this is a book that I want to have part of my collection, which is why I pre-ordered it. Sorry, don't hate me, but anything by R.F. Kuang, I'm gonna read. I love her writing so much. So yeah, Calabasas for October. Yep. So get ready and be prepared, because I have a feeling it's gonna be a fun time. And I believe it's a dark academia book, if I'm not mistaken. Correct me if I'm wrong. So once again, looking forward to that. And in October, once again, it's gonna be Calabasas by R.F. Kuang. And then lastly, for November, we have Buffalo Hunter by Stephen Graham Jones. I've met him early on this year in 2024. Really enjoyed like talking to him and listening to his story of how he became a writer, everything. And so I'm really excited to get into Buffalo Hunter. And it's also in November as well, which is part of Indigenous Month. So I'm like, oh, this would be the perfect read to do so. And then once again, December, we have that month off. And so once again, if I go back to January, if you decide to join me in January to read Death of the Author by Nnedi Okorafor, we will have the live discussion on my Patreon in the following month. So you get that cushion, you have that time, right? I try to give people time to read it. Sometimes they'll read it maybe the week prior to the live discussion, so that way it's like fresh in their brain. So you have options, you have time, and you definitely have a lot of time now, especially since I'm giving you the schedule in advance. So that is our year for 2025 for my Patreon book club. Once again, this is optional. If you are a Patreon, or if you want to become a Patreon, you can decide what books you want to read next year. You have that time. You have time to read the other 2 books prior to Faithbreaker by Hannah Kaner. You have time to read Faybound by Sarah El Arifi before we read Cursebound in May. So you have time and you have that cushion. And like I said, I wanted to be more organized. I wanted to give my Patreon that leg up of knowing what what we're going to be reading throughout 2025. But I look forward to discussing these books with you. I look forward to, if you join my Patreon, we're going to have a good time. I definitely want to be more interactive with you all, so it's going to be fun. So once again, if you would like to join my Patreon, you can do so. I will leave the link down below in the description so that you can join. Once again, it's $4. But yeah, I look forward to seeing you all, and I cannot wait to read all these amazing books with you, and I will catch y'all in 2025. Bye, y'all. Have a great day.